Everybody gets really like shift in the seat. Everybody fixes their clothes. Everybody gets uncomfortable. Somebody gets up and leaves. There's always that moment, and especially in a testing situation. Somebody starts coughing, and 30 other people start coughing. In that situation, people are kind of taking stock. Like, okay, where am I going to test? How am I feeling? Am I going to be able to finish in time? And that body scan will also help you to concentrate. Tense and relax is another activity or technique that can be really useful. You tense yourself up, you tense up all of your muscles as much as you can, and then you just let go of it. Exercising aerobically, that's not something you can always get up and go run around the block in the middle of a test. If you've been in the lab with me, that's time or two, every now and then I have to say, you know what, this is too much, go work out, come back tomorrow. Go walk around the block, go walk down the hall, come back tomorrow. The blood flow in the brain and that physical activity actually helps you integrate what you're trying to learn or what you're trying to do with the test. I had a student years ago who said he got most of his accounting homework done when he was playing basketball, because it was easier for him to think about stuff after he'd done something else. It was very physical and very tiring. Other things to do are real practical, and the next page talks about all that kind of practical stuff. Fact sheets. One of the first things I tell students is if you experience test anxiety, when you walk into the test, at the top of the test, if you're allowed, or if you're allowed to use scratch paper, write down everything you know. Write down everything that you know that you were supposed to study. Write down, jot down keywords. If it's an essay exam, jot down the key things that you know you need to know. And then as you go through the exam, you kind of check those things off. Note cards, if you're the kind of person to carry around note cards, or to make notes if you have something in a phone, a tool in your phone that you can use, or an application you can use. Make note cards, make notes to yourself. Outlines, word lists. One of the biggest issues that people have difficulty with staying organized is that they don't stay organized about being organized. So they are organized about their money, but they keep it in envelopes, they keep their receipts in their car, they keep tax information in a box, in a shoebox in the attic. That's not really being organized. So if you go into a testing situation and you've got a little information that you thought about a couple weeks ago, and a whole bunch of information that you studied the night before, and some stuff that you read in the book the first day, you're probably going to have a lot more trouble being organized than if you're more consistent about how you study. So there's all kinds of suggestions. I'm not going to go over all of these. There's some suggestions about reading. If you're 8 chapters behind and the test is tomorrow, when is your test anxiety going to start?
Yesterday.
Yep. You've already got test anxiety before the test has ever happened, because you know you're behind and you're worried really about how you're going to get 3-4 weeks of work done in one night. Your anxiety is really about the work that you missed. How do you do that? Are you going to be able to stay up and read 200 pages and study for a test? Probably not. So you can get caught up on reading pretty quickly. Look at headings, look at subheadings, look at bold-faced words, look at terms, look at the information that you were given if you were given a study guide. Look at summary sections, look at the notes. In other words, don't try to sit there all night long and try to read the entire book. Look for highlights and start trying to piece together what you can quickly. There's some other suggestions: keeping snacks on hand, planning something special, reward yourself. If you've got anxiety about something, but you know something good's coming later, you'll get through it a lot better. The biggest issue probably in the last 5 years, especially the last 3, is information that's been released, mostly from psychologists at universities and psychiatrists who study college students, especially in testing situations, is that cramming and staying up all night is actually detrimental to studying. That it actually changes your brain patterns when you stay up all night, and the same activity in your brain that happens when you are actively learning something is the same activity that happens in your brain when you sleep, particularly when you dream. So it actually is bad for you and bad probably for your studying and test performance to try to stay up all night and pull an all-nighter and cram. Because what you're actually doing is you're shutting down the parts of your brain that are most active when you learn. That also applies if you have a big project due. It's also another time that happens. What happens when you've got anxiety about a project? You're worried about getting it done. You're not able to actually focus and concentrate on the quality of the project. Test-taking skills. Some of this is going to sound really obvious, and one of the things that I try to emphasize when I talk about stuff like this is knowing yourself is the best test-taking strategy you could ever have. Short answer exams. Answer the questions you know first. Look at the point value of each question. Some of this is common sense. If you've got short answer questions and long answer questions, and the long answer question is worth half the points on the test, and the other ones are worth 5 points, which ones are you going to answer? You're going to answer the long answer one. Essay exams, one of the problems about an essay exam is that you're doing all the things that you have to do to write an essay, but you're doing it in a short amount of space. So you have to bring everything you know all at once. It can be stressful. So you can look at all of these. One of the best ways to study for an essay exam is to actually pretend you're writing an essay. So you can look through those. Look at the end on problem-solving tests. And you see down at the end, when you finish, go back and check for mistakes. Think about when you write an essay. Think about the last test you just took. There were several this week. Most of the time, it's those little bitty errors, those minor things, that if you had time to go back and check, you might have had a chance to correct it. Those are things that are useful. If none of that works, you go into test situations regularly, especially starting about this time of the semester, and then you keep going, and every time you have a test, things just get worse, and your grades start to drop, what's going to happen to your test anxiety level? It's going to keep going up, keep going up, keep going up. So you might not actually have test anxiety, but as you proceed, things just get worse for yourself, and you start having a much more difficult time. That's where we come in. There's more tricks to our trade for helping people in testing situations than I've begun to learn in 20 years. There are lots of strategies. Some of the stuff on the next page is about using your brain. Some of it I'm not going to worry too much about. One of the things I'd say is this. Look at the second point there about avoiding isolated fact learning. Learning and teaching content such as science, literature, or history as accumulated facts is quickly forgotten. Like for instance, if you ask me to tell you what the main components of a cell are, it's been 25 years since I took any biology. I can't tell you. I don't even know. Why? It's not really relevant for what I do professionally. It's not something I have to know. Many of you have worked with me and you come in for tutoring and you've asked me a question and I don't know the answer. One of the problems about learning is that if you try to learn something without knowing how it's connected to other material, your brain has nowhere to put it. So one of the best things to think about is to try to figure out how things are connected. If you just try to memorize 50 facts, the minute you hit the door, they're already gone. Another point I'd say that's interesting is to build an entrepreneur mind. What's an entrepreneur? A person who, what it literally means is goes out and gets it for the taking. That's what the literal translation of that word means. You go out and get it for the taking. You pursue opportunity. If you have a mind where you're always thinking about the next step and always thinking about what you're building toward, information is going to be a way to do that. So when you study for a test, you're not necessarily going to be thinking, I'm studying so that I can pass this test. You're going to be studying because you're thinking about the next course you're going to be taking. An entrepreneurial mind is looking at how does this test fit into my whole semester? How does this test fit into my whole time at Independence Community College? How does this test that I'm taking right now fit into other courses I'm going to take when I transfer out? So beware of mindless reading is another one. The mind actually will wander off, and you'll find that you're actually thinking about something else, and you're as easily distracted, and you read something, and it's like you didn't actually read it. So these are suggestions, some of which that I've already talked about: sleep, exercise, things like that. Some of it is just really common sense. The next thing to think about is just this last part on this chart. The first time I did this chart, I actually was awake and doing something like 27 hours a day. And I was way off on the estimates about how I actually spend my time. I was way off on how much sleep I get, which wasn't enough the first time I did this. If you're really honest with yourself, thinking about what you do and how you actually do it, there's 168 hours in a week. One of the things that's not on this chart is studying. And so it turns out that one of the most important ways to deal with test anxiety is to make appointments with yourself to study, where you actually dedicate some particular time. And what happens when you do that is that you teach your body, you teach your brain to pay attention to those moments. And you teach your brain and you teach your body. You teach your brain and you teach your body that when you sit down to study, what's going to happen when you sit down to take the test? You're going to re-experience what you did when you were studying. So you're going to reduce your chances of anxiety. It's no different than practicing for anything else. When you practice and practice and practice, when it comes time to perform, you're ready to go. Everybody at some point or another is going to have test anxiety. And Brandon, what was your word? Yeah. What was the word over here? Swag?
Swag.
Oh, no, it was cool. What was yours?
Cool.
Food.
We all say cool.
So if I told you were going to have a test quickly over Wrench, cheeseburger, literary theory, and number 2, how would you do that? How would you remember that? If you're going to have a test over Wrench, cheeseburger, literary theory, and the number 2, and it's right now,
Ever try to remember those things?
how would you do that? It's over, what's it over again?
Cheeseburger and literary something.
Wrench, cheeseburger, literary theory, and
2.
the number 2. How are you going to remember that?
Food. And it's the number 2 food. Number 2 is cheeseburger.
You got a number 2 and the cheeseburger put together?
Yeah, that's number 2 on the McDonald's menu.
All right, stop right there. What did he just do? It's a mnemonic device. It's a memory device, and you did it too. He's relating it. He's thinking about
Number 2 is
something
the corn
about his
pounder.
personal
Number 2
experience.
is the corn pounder.
I'm not. You know what I'm thinking about? You know what I'm thinking about? A wrench, throwing it through the window.
Oh, okay.
That's how my brain works. I remember watching a movie where somebody was trying to fix something and he couldn't fix it. He's doing everything he could. He said, let's do it the old-fashioned way. And he took the wrench and he started beating it. And he fixed it. That's how I think of things. I remember movies, or I remember moments where something happened where I learned something and it resonated with me. What is it again? Wrench, cheeseburger, literary theory, and the number 2. How many of you started to write that down? How many of you are thinking, I don't even know what literary theory is? Test anxiety happens around you all the time, and your ability to tap into your own strength and your own ability to remember things and to remember that you actually have the skills and the tools that you need to create the short-term recall. And that ultimately, 5 years from now, 2 or 3 years from now, what you'll really remember is the information that you needed in order to pass the test and perhaps succeed on the test and do even better than that, because you will have harder and harder tests as you go. Go ahead and do the time management sheet, put your name on it, go ahead and do the evaluation,